This gracious gift serves to delineate for us, for me at least, some aspects of the program. It causes me to comprehend him after a fashion. I think we cannot know what he is, but we can experience his functioning, and so can ask, what does he resemble? Not what is he, but rather what is he like? First and foremost, he controls the objects, processes, and events in our space-time world. This is, for us, the primary aspect, although intrinsically he may possess aspects of greater magnitude, but of less applicability to us. I have spoken of myself as a reprogrammed variable, and I have spoken of him as the programmer and reprogrammer. During a short period of time in March of 1974, at the moment in which I was re-synthesized, I was aware perceptually, which is to say aware in an external way of his presence. At that time, I had no idea what I was seeing. It resembled nothing that I had ever heard described. It resembled plasmic energy. It had colors. It moved fast. It collected and then dispersed.
That reminds me of Abraham Hicks or Esther Hicks asking God, or Abraham, now she was asking Abraham to show itself, and then the first time she saw Abraham, it was also like light. It looked like lightning bugs flung together, and then she understood, oh, so you are energy. I never saw God. I mean, everything is God. Everything is made of atoms. Everything that exists is God. Everything, there's consciousness in every atom because there's energy in every atom, so everything is God. But I never saw God like this, but I did in meditation have this experience, but not like in my waking life.
But what it was, what he was, I am not sure even now. Except I can tell you that he had simulated normal objects and their processes so as to copy them, and in such an artful way as to make himself invisible within them. As the Vedantas put it, he is the fire within the flint, the razor within the razor case. Later research showed me that in terms of group cultural experience, the name Brahman has been given to this omnipresent, immanent entity. One thing I really want you to know, I am aware that the claims I am making, claims of having retrieved buried memories of an alternate present and to have perceived the agency responsible for arranging that alternation, these claims can neither be proved nor can they be even made to sound rational in the usual sense of the word. It has taken me over 3 years to reach the point where I am willing to tell anyone but my closest friends about my experience beginning back at the vernal equinox of 1974.
Il y a une chose que j'aimerais bien que vous sachiez. Je me rends compte.
One of the reasons motivating me to speak about it publicly at last, to openly make this claim, is a recent encounter I have undergone, which, by the way, bears a strange resemblance to Hawthorne Abinson's experience in my novel The Man in the High Castle with the woman Juliana Frink. Juliana read Abinson's book about a world in which Germany and Japan and Italy. Now, this is a little difficult if you haven't read the book, but he wrote a novel in which Germany, Italy, and Japan lost World War II, and he was living in a world in which they had won World War II. Juliana read Abinson's book about a world in which the Axis lost, and she felt she should tell him what she comprehended about the book. In other words, that his novel was true. Now, this final scene in Man in the High Castle has been the source for a similar scene in my later story, Faith of Our Fathers, where the girl Tanya Lee shows up and acquaints the protagonist with the actual reality situation, which is to say that much of his world is delusional and purposefully so.
Okay, I did make a mistake. I'm sorry. I remembered it in the way that he himself experienced the world where Germany won the war. So it is nothing he experienced, obviously. It is a story he wrote. Instead, what he experienced was the Nixon thing, you know, Nixon not being overthrown. So he did experience a very different alternate universe, but it was not as I had remembered the World War thing. So I'm sorry about this. It was the Nixon presidency. Let's continue watching.
In other words, it's a common theme in my writing that a dark-haired girl shows up at the door of the protagonist and tells him that his world is delusional, that there's something false about it.
I'm actually also really excited about that part coming up now, because we have manifesting, a amazing manifestation story coming up. So he just told us that he has written several books. So it is a common theme in his writing that a dark-haired woman is showing up and telling the protagonist that his world is delusional. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Matrix, when Trinity is coming to Neo, telling him that his world is not real. So we do have this trope that he has used a lot in his writing. Always the same. Dark-haired woman telling the protagonist the world you're living in is not real. And we do have this interesting manifesting story coming up.
Now, in Man in the High Castle, the situation is ironically reversed. The girl that comes to the door tells an author that his book of fiction is true.
And this is where our manifesting story begins now.
For several years, I have had the feeling, a growing feeling, that one day a woman who would be a complete stranger to me would contact me and tell me that she had some information to impart to me, and then she would appear at my door just as Juliana appeared at Hawthorne Abinson's door, and that forthwith, in the gravest possible way, she would tell me exactly what Juliana told Abinson, and that is that my book, like his, was in a certain real, literal, and physical sense not fiction but the truth.
So, okay, he has that happen in his books, and he's had the feeling the same thing he has been writing about would happen to him in real life. And you know the law of assumption, right? You know what's going to happen next.
Well, this did finally happen to me.
It finally happened to him.
I even knew that her hair would be black. I had an actual complete sense of what she would look like and what she would say.
Before I learned about manifesting, I would have believed that that was a premonition. Well, it still may be a premonition because, again, multiple timelines, infinite timelines, and that did not happen on every timeline. It is a premonition of that happening in a timeline. Earlier we were talking about the déjà vu, about sensing something that has not happened yet, but since time is an illusion, our soul already knows that this exists, it is happening, and then we can read it and pick up on it. But it is not a premonition in the sense of that is set in stone. It is more like there is this feeling he had that that might happen to him. He gave focus to that, and then it determined getting onto the timeline where it does happen. So the premonition is more like, okay, you may go there, but then you could either decide, no, that's not what I want, or okay, that's what I do want. I have an example for that I think is very fitting. One time I was downtown and I was at the underground subway station, and I personally can take several ones. I can take the 1 and 2 that go one direction, and then the 3, 4, 5, 6 that go into another one, and I live in between. So I could go either to this train station or to that one, and I live there in between somewhat. The 7 did not go there, so I couldn't have taken that. And the 8 or 9, those are the only ones I could not have taken because those would go to the other side of the river. When I got down the escalator, there was already the train standing there, and let's say it said either as 3, 4, 5, 6, one of those. I stepped into that train and I felt off, and I had the vision in my inner eye how I would be completely annoyed getting off on the other side of the river and then having to go back. And I asked someone, okay, what train is this? And no, before I asked, I waited for the next stop, and then I looked out the window, and again I saw 3, 4, 5, 6, one of those, but not 8 or 9. but still my gut feeling told me something is wrong. So I asked someone, excuse me, which train is this I'm in right now? And 2 people answered. One said 3, 4, 5, 6, one of those, and the other one said, well, either 8 or 9. And then the last stop was the main train station before the ways split. And I got out there, and I was already in the very back, and then I was in the back of the train, then I walked behind it, and I could see the plate, or like the number on it. It actually was like 8 or 9, one of those that I couldn't have taken. The premonition I've had, like seeing myself, or the vision, completely annoyed getting onto the other train, was like, if you stay on that path, in that case on that train, this is where you get. That's your future going to be. You're going to be annoyed and then you have to drive back. But instead I changed something. I acted, and then I realized that I was on the wrong train, and then I just had to wait for the right one for a couple of minutes. So a premonition is nothing like this is going to happen. It is more telling you this is likely to happen unless you change something. And for him, he had this premonition, like that thing, that woman would come to him. It was this inner knowing, but this inner knowing, the focus he gave into that law of assumption, is what made it manifest. So let's watch more of that.
My door, and I'm speaking of a woman who had systematically read every single novel of mine, which is more than 30 novels, as well as many of my stories. She did appear. She was a total stranger, and she did inform me of this fact, that some of my fictional works were, in a literal sense, true.
There you have it. Perfect manifestation, isn't it? Amazing. He knew all the details, and that inner knowing got pushed out.
Now, I had posited in 1974, when my memories of this alternate world came back, that if these memories were authentic, that it was only a matter of time before a contact, a cautious, guarded probing by someone would occur, initiated by a person who had read my book and for one reason or another deduced the actual situation. I mean, knew what the significant information was which the books and stories carried. Now, this woman knew from my novels and stories which world I had experienced, which of the many. What she could not determine until I told her was that in February of 1975, I had passed across into a third alternative present, a third one, track C, we will call it. And this was a garden or park of peace and beauty, a world superior to ours, rising into existence.
So, okay, but what I don't understand right now is his earlier argument about we only can go to better ones. I mean, this is like the second time, or maybe he is referring to when he met Christ or lived in a world where Christ returned. Maybe that's the same one, because he's talking about 3 different ones now. Nixon overpowered his main one, and then the beautiful garden ones. But earlier he was talking about that there was like one main one, right, where I disagreed with him. So maybe he thought that some people get to live in the positive main ones, like let's say track B. Some live in the negative track A, where there was the police tyranny, and then there's this beautiful garden track C. And then from this main world coming from, there could be some alterations, like he described, changing things in the past. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this video is so long that I'm going to edit it into several parts, and you can check out the first parts. So some people, maybe this might be his argument, get as their primary world track A, others get as their primary world track B, and others track C. But he tells us about shifting into one that is less positive, one that is more beneficial, definitely. But at the same time, he tells us that when we change, that it could only get better. So I'm not quite sure of his arguments right here. What I believe is, according to the law of assumption, in that moment of the shift, something within him must have resonated with this really beautiful garden world. But then something else must have kicked in, like, okay, this is now real, this is not my reality, and something that got him back into what he calls, I think it was track B, even though I don't think, again, there's infinite realities. So let's say maybe not exactly that track, but one that resembles more where he's coming from.